Very interesting. So, can you just explain a little more in detail about Carolyn Quarles' journey through the Johnsons Park neighborhood?
Well, Carolyn's journey, Carolyn was my great-great-great-grandmother, and her journey started in 1842 on the 4th of July in St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
Carolyn was born on the corner, as her letters say, on the corner of Pine and 6th in St. Louis,
Okay.
which I've never been to St. Louis, so I can't really vouch for it, but people have told me is not too far from the Gateway Arch now.
Oh, okay.
She was born in a plantation home, the home of her father. She was the daughter of the slave owner and one of his slaves. And at 16, in 1842, she had decided that she wanted her freedom. She didn't have everything that literally her cousins whom she lived with, her first cousins, had, primarily because she had African American blood in her. And so she decided to escape, and she left on a ferry boat. She walked away from her plantation home with a bundle of clothes under her arm and $100, part of which had been given to her by her paternal grandmother.
Okay.
And she bought a ticket on a riverboat ferry at the ferry dock at the base of the Mississippi River, and actually rode across the river to Alton, Illinois, which is on the other side from St. Louis.
Okay.
Technically was free, but when she arrived, she was greeted by what would have been an emancipated slave who saw her when she got off and kind of looked at her and kind of gave her a look and said, maybe she doesn't belong here. Carolyn looked the part of the young ladies that were on the boat. She was very fair. She was freckled. She had blue eyes, and she had jet black hair.
Wow.
And so she looked like just the schoolgirls that were actually on the boat. So she actually kind of probably looked lost, though, because she was by herself and had never been there. And the gentleman approached her and said, I don't know, ma'am, if you're escaping, you shouldn't stay here, because Alton, Illinois was a known abolitionist hole, as they say. And because of that, bounty hunters came there first. So he got her to the stagecoach station and put her on a stagecoach, and lo and behold, she ended up in Milwaukee.
Wow. Okay.
So in Milwaukee, she was greeted at the stagecoach station by another emancipated slave. His name was Robert Tidball. He was the local barber, and the stagecoach station at the time was in the Milwaukee House Hotel, which was probably, the big fancy hotel of the time. His barbershop happened to be in the hotel, so he probably stood around trying to get business when the stagecoach pulled up. And when he saw her get off, he had the same reaction that the other guy did, that she looked out of place a little bit, being someone who had been emancipated. And so he approached her and said, come with me, and I'll hide you. So she stayed with Robert Tidball for a couple of weeks until he decided that the money that they were offering, the bounty hunters were offering to her, for her, was too much to turn down. So she was actually going to be given up by Robert Tidball. There had been bounty hunters that had followed her from St. Louis, paid for by her owner, and there was a $800 bounty being paid by the ferry boat company, because they actually let stolen property get away.
Wow.
So they were liable for the property. And there was an extra $300 being paid by the bounty hunters for any information to get her. So Tidball was going to get that money, and there was a young guy that worked for him that didn't exactly trust him, I guess. I don't know how trustworthy he must have been, but he got wind of what Tidball was going to do and give her up, and Tidball told him, take her to a specific place. And he decided not to do that. He took her somewhere else. And he alerted one of the local lawyers that there was someone was escaping and that she was being chased and that she needed help. And that someone happened to be Asa Finch, who was a local lawyer at the time. And he actually retrieved her from her hiding place, and he took her over to what is now Water Street. And he had her climb into a sugar barrel. Those great big barrels. She climbed in a sugar barrel, and she was hidden in that sugar barrel for 12 hours. Crouched down, lid on, because the bounty hunters at that point were going door to door knocking, looking for her.
Okay.
And after the 12 hours came, it got night, got dark, so it was easier to get her out. Excuse me. So Aso Finch actually put her in a buggy, and he took her to another one of his associates, and that would be Deacon. They called him Deacon, Samuel Brown. Samuel Brown was one of the founders of Milwaukee.
Okay.
And one of the founding fathers. He came here in 1836 with another couple of gentlemen and staked his claim, as they say. And it just so happens that the Samuel Brown farm site now, where Carolyn was taken by Aso Finch, is Johnson Park.
Wow.
After all of its comings and goings, it is now Johnson Park. Aso Finch, after Carolyn's escape, actually established a law firm with another one of the lawyers that was involved, and his name was William Lind, who eventually became senator. But they formed the partnership of Finch and Lind, which over the course of the last 178 years or so has now become Foley and Lardner. So Foley and Lardner, I guess one of the biggest law firms in Milwaukee as well as the country, owes their beginnings to the Carolyn Quarles escape.
Wow.
But from Johnson Park, which, as I said, was Samuel Brown's farm site, she stayed overnight. And when it got dark the next night, she and Samuel Brown went out into the countryside in one of his wagons. They lost a wheel somewhere along the way, and he had brought he had a horse and had brought a saddle, so they actually had to ride horseback. And they rode out into the countryside, out near what is now Waukesha, I guess Prairieville, Spring Prairie. And he deposited Carolyn out in the countryside with a man by the name of Samuel Daltrey. They called him Deacon as well. These were all deacons in the local congregational church.
Okay.
And as it happened, Deacon Daltrey actually was his ex-father-in-law. His first wife had died, but that was her father. And from the east, there were a lot of men that had traveled east, well, men and families, women, that had traveled from the east that staking their claim in the new territory. But they had been abolitionists then, and when they got to the territory here, they continued their abolitionist ways. So they are actually who helped Carolyn get out of Milwaukee and into Illinois, cross over in the border. Lyman Goodnow was a bachelor, apparently a little older, probably in his mid-30s, and they decided that he would be the one to take her further because everyone else had families. So they gave him $20. They went amongst them. They rounded up $20 and got some food and a pillowcase and a sack. And they got another buggy for him and put her in the buggy and covered her over with hay and a great big one of those buffalo robes, and off they went. And between here and Windsor, they did about 500 miles.
Wow.
The two of them, stopping here and there before they got to Windsor safely. Bounty hunters on their heels all the way. As a matter of fact, by the time they made it to Detroit, the bounty hunters literally watched as they rowed her across the river. So they paid a man in Detroit. His name was William Lambert, who was a big abolitionist in Detroit as well as the country, and they paid him $12 to actually row her across the river, to safety.
Okay. Amazing history.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. Actually, they met a lot of different people along the way. A lot of people were connected to that story. Like I said, the Foley and Lardner law firm is connected to the story.
Yeah.